All right, time for another review. Man, I hope the kids start feeling better. They weren't feeling too good tonight. Hello?
Have you checked the children?
When a psychopathic killer terrorizes a babysitter, and 7 years later, he returns to continue his menace. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. You're watching Backtrack Cinema. My name is Jason. This is where we talk movies of the past that you know and love. And today's review is When a Stranger Calls, directed by Fred Walton, released in 1979, starring Carol Kane and Charles Durning. And admittedly, guys, this is a movie that just terrified me when I first watched it as a young teenager. I remember being 12, like 11, 12. And this movie got to me. This movie just really got to me. Watched it with my mom, and it was, we kept the lights down. Very moody, very atmospheric. This is the movie I'm kind of excited to talk about, actually. So comment down below. Let me know what you think of When a Stranger Calls from 1979, continuing our 70s horror series kind of this month for October. Hope you're enjoying the spooky season. So let me know in the comments, and we'll have a good discussion about When a Stranger Calls. Now, I did get a couple movies mixed up in my brain here. When a Stranger Calls and When a Stranger Calls Back is the sequel. Now, I remember as a kid being freaked out. I blended both of these movies together, and what freaked me out about the sequel is that he was a ventriloquist and he was throwing his voice outside. But I also remember the original, and when the cop phones back and said the caller's coming from inside the house, and we're going, oh man, this is freaky, man. And this is before I ever saw Black Christmas. So you know how Black Christmas kind of does the same thing with Billy in the attic, where he's been in the house the whole time. And we got to give When a Stranger Calls some credit, because when you look at Scream and how popular Scream got, using the phone calls, Wes Craven maneuvering around that in a similar way, but doing his own thing with it. So When a Stranger Calls, he did do some things for horror. Now, this movie starts off very, very good, and we got to dissect this thing between the three acts, because the second act, I find this movie kind of falls apart and just goes off on what it really should be, and kind of brings it back with a good third act. So, and like, it's not perfect by any means, but it's a very atmospheric, moody film. And that first act is just, that first 20 minutes is amazing, where Jill is in there, she's babysitting, and they throw something into the plot where the kids were sick. So she said, just let them sleep. So she never bothers ever checking on them. And when she gets these phone calls about, have you checked the children? And all that kind of stuff, it's, in the moment where she's gonna go up, she finally goes to check on them. She gets another phone call from him, and so she never ends up checking the children. And spoiler alert, movie's freaking as old as I am. He's killed the children. You know what I mean? And you kind of get these little quick images of what that would look like later on. But he's killed the children. But the way this all plays out, with his voice is creepy as hell. And the way she's slowly moving through the house, using the sense of dread, tension, slow moving camera work, using sound to your advantage to really draw you into all this. Or it's dark in the house and all that. Those nice shots of where it looks like he's actually from outside, but he was never outside. Brilliant stuff in this first act to really terrify you. What makes things scary is when you can relate to a real life situation. You babysitting, getting creepy phone calls. Back in those days, you'd get prank calls all the freaking time. I remember anyway. But that's what makes these things scary. When we can relate to a situation, I think they can amp up the scare factor a lot more by, the building up of tension. When he says that one line, she goes, what do you want? And he's like, your blood all over me, like that. I was just like, wow, it's crazy. It's just terrifying. And why is it terrifying? Because you'd never see him. The mind conjuring shit up, man, is terrifying. And the fact that you never see him, and that's where the movie falls apart, is in the second act, where it's 7 years later. This guy has been caught. He got put in a mental asylum. He escapes, and he starts targeting this other woman. I find the whole second act pointless. They show you who he is now. He's a schizophrenic and all that. and you're showing him too much. You never should have saw this guy. And the problem with it, we're spending time with these new characters, and they just don't work as well for me. The filmmaker's also he's putting things in there almost make you feel sorry for him. I go, this guy killed 2 innocent children. I'm not feeling sorry for him. He's very much someone who does not fit into society, and he gets beat up at this bar. I just don't like that decision. Don't try to make us feel sorry for this guy. Don't show us who he is, because he was a lot scarier when we didn't know who he was. And there's some choppy editing in this second act where it's like he's getting beat up at a bar, and you don't even see a fist hitting him. You know what I mean? Yet you see him all bloody and everything. It's just very choppy editing and stuff like that. And the detective who was on the scene, Charles Durning's character, we see him that he's a private investigator now, and he wants to catch this guy, right? Because he knows how dangerous he is, because he's the first guy on the scene that night of what happened to Jill when she was babysitting. So the second act, the movie starts off so good. And it should have stayed with Jill. I think we should have stayed with Jill through this whole movie, or made the movie all about the babysitting the whole night. The whole movie should have been that. But they veer off course, man. Like they're driving down a highway and they just veer off. Even the tension and everything in that second act is not handled well. You know what I mean? Like, where he's hiding in her apartment, and you feel like something's going to happen, but it's so quick. She walks by, she walks out, he just comes out of the closet. And I said, you could have had a good moment of tension there, but I digress a bit. It's just, the second act falls apart on every level. And then when he can't get this woman, when he actually gets almost caught and stuff like that, then he targets Jill again. He picks up a newspaper where you see Jill in the paper. She's, married with 2 kids. She's become quite successful. And you get a good scene where she's at the restaurant out with her husband, and he phones about, have you checked the children? And then she rushes home, and then you get a great third act confrontation. There's that scene where she lays down to go to sleep right at the end, and she's shaking her husband, but it's actually the killer. It's the killer's back, and she's right beside him. And great way. It's a weird movie because it starts great, it ends great. The middle is where it just completely falls apart. At the end of the day, this movie is still worth your time if you haven't seen it. It pulls you right in. It will really kind of get you unsettled, unnerved, terrified, veers off of it, and it comes back again. I think there's some good performances in here. I think the building of tension is excellent. So I'm going to give When a Stranger Calls a C+. That grade would have been a lot higher if that second act made a lot more sense within the narrative of the story, but too many problems with that second act. But what about you guys? Tell me what you think of When a Stranger Calls. If you've seen it, if you haven't seen it, go see it. Come back. Let's talk about When a Stranger Calls. Do you think it was an influence on Scream and with the phone calls and stuff? Because, I've heard some people say that When a Stranger Calls is the mother of Scream. So kind of interesting. I could definitely see it. I can definitely see it. The way they open up Scream and everything, it kind of has that kind of influence to it. But let me know in the comments. Let's have a great conversation about When a Stranger Calls. That's gonna do it for me, guys. You are watching Backtrack Cinema. My name is Jason. I will see you next time, and I will see you in the movies. Cheers.